I'm such a big fan of the history of the business, and I'm really big into that. And to go back and get Bruno, to go back and get Warrior, especially during the circumstance of how it all went down.
But you're mending fences or bridges that were burned down by those Tyler events, whatever,
by whoever,
and the relationship was damaged.
Yeah, and like with Bruno, I went to Vince one day because I just always felt it was wrong that he wasn't in there. And I just went to Vince one day and I was like, hey, what do you think about Bruno? And he's like, Rick should be in there, I said, but it never happened. I said, wait, you okay if I call him?
Cheat between them?
No, Vince wasn't angry, but I think he just thought Bruno was so angry. And
what was Bruno angry about?
They had a falling out over a lot of things over the years, and then he didn't.
Oh, that's never happened before.
Yeah, and then he didn't agree with where the business went, and and they just had a lot of bad blood, and and then it's like it just kind of goes. I think you're mad at me, and then you think I'm mad at you, so we never talk about it, and we never.
Boy, it's so bad in this business.
It is. It's terrible, and it's because everybody's a part. They build things up in their minds. It's this guy's swerving me, and it's the conspiracy theory, and when I went to Vince to ask him about Bruno, he was like, you call him if you want. You want to waste your time? Ain't never going to happen. I worked on that. I worked on that.
What was tougher, getting Bruno in or Warrior? I mean, just getting them back on page with Vince.
Well, they both had their challenges, and it was a lot of listening and a lot of just, I don't think that's how it really, the feeling is this, and it was just earning trust. Warrior was different because Bruno and I had one time I'd spoke to Bruno ever in my life, and I called him cold, and then we just started to have conversations, and I did, when you're his age, it's a trust issue, and he had to learn she didn't know me, and he had to learn to trust me in a business that long ago didn't have a whole lot of guys that you could trust, and he had to learn to trust me, and he said it at the end, he never once lied to me about any of this, and Warrior was different because we didn't have a trust.
Right.
We had a bad.
He was in that don't trust anybody category,
without a doubt. And it's also funny. He and I both said as we went through the process, you live and you learn and you grow. The day you stop growing, the day you stop learning and growing, you're done. Right. I was in a different place as a person when I was in WrestleMania with him, which people bring up a lot to me as if it's a sore spot in my career. It wasn't. I had a bad personal experience with a guy at the moment, but it was one of the coolest moments of my life. Vince McMahon came to me prior to WrestleMania 12 and said, hey, no one knows this yet, but the Ultimate Warrior is going to come back, and I'd like you to work with him at WrestleMania. My first WrestleMania was with the Ultimate Warrior. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was a mind-bogglingly awesome opportunity for me, and was still awesome experience. But he and I had a rub then, and then over the years things are said, right, and all that stuff, and so we had to get past that for ourselves, and then we had to get past a whole lot of stuff with him and Vince, and he was a unique cat, man, and but as I stayed open to that process, I realized he was a lot misunderstood. A lot of his anger and his
lack of communication.
Yeah, he didn't know how to communicate.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest issues in the lift. And all of a sudden, when I go in that DTA mode, it turns into a cluster. And I know he was full of that. And just a few of the conversations I had with him, but he seemed like a sweetheart of a guy.
He just couldn't let it go.
Right.
You get past it, right? And then he couldn't let it go.
Hey, who do you think was more influential in the business, NWO or DX?
I think that if I say what was influential, the NWO at first was massively influential in that it kind of took this reality slant of the business, with Kevin and Scott going over there looking like it was this invasion and Hogan jumping in with him, but the massive impact that they had quickly dissipated because they put a bunch of guys in there and it got watered down and it fell apart. So it was massively influential, but it didn't last long. If I had to say over time, DX probably did more things in the various incarnations over a long period of time to influence, the way we did things, and were able to take stuff in the business, not take it seriously, but make it serious. Right. Goof on something, but yet make it into something you want to fight about. And I think that changed stuff over the course of time more. But the NWO was at first, it shifted the business.
If you could go back in time and have a match with anybody you wanted to, who would you pick?
Buddy Rogers.
Why?
It's funny because a lot of guys will probably go home tonight and have to Google Buddy Rogers. And I know you're kind of a fan of that time and that era too, but he was the first guy to me in the business, when I'm a big buff in the history stuff, he was the first guy that transcended, like, he wasn't just a shooter, he wasn't just, like it was, he had this look, and then he had the way he carried himself. He wasn't the biggest guy, but he had this way about him, and he was tan, and he had the hair, and he talked the talk, and he walked the walk, and he had the strut, and he did the stuff, but man, he could tell, you hear stories about guys all the time, but he was a guy, if you walked to the ring one way, he was a bad guy, you walked to the ring another way, he was a good guy, he could manipulate the crowd. He had that larger-than-life thing going, where he just wasn't, a lot of the guys prior to that were just wrestlers, and they were just like a Lou Fez, or, I don't mean that as a knock to them, but just the personality was different. He was the first larger-than-life, man, he was a character.
Well, I want to go into some word association. Before I do, you mended fences